back. It is 8:31 p.m. on Friday the 13th, October, and that is Eastern time for me. All right, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to go over Hurricane Ophelia up here in the top right corner, which is heading towards areas of Ireland, Northern Ireland, even Scotland's in there, and then the UK. Some of the models have the UK in a little bit better shape than earlier in the day, but then again, some of the models don't. So we still have a lot of time before this storm actually gets to where it's going to go. The models will shift again, but what I'm going to show you now is the current tracks for what we're going to see with Ophelia heading up, and this is basically the jet stream that passes through Canada, and it's staying pretty high. There are low areas that are coming soon, and that's actually what is going to affect our new disturbance down here, hopefully in a good way. And then right after that, we have something going on down here in the Caribbean again, a lot of action. And the timing of this is going to be interesting because, like I just said, we have a very low area of the jet stream coming through, which is hopefully going to pull this system out, maybe even before it forms, or even if it does form, it looks like it's going to be influenced before it would do any damage or anything significant, at least to the Bahamas and the East Coast. I'm not too sure yet about the Leeward and Lesser Antilles Islands. It depends on how this thing forms, and also, of course, Puerto Rico. I've been thinking about with this storm. So the longer it takes to form, the better. And I'm going to show you the disturbance chart really quick. And if you take a quick look, this sketch area right here is the area where they believe it will form if it forms. You can see now over 48 hours we're at 10%, and then over 5 days we're at 30%. So the 2-day outlook has gone up to 10%. That's still not a big number, and the reason for that low number is because we're dealing with a lot of shear winds with this disturbance already, which is probably going to more than likely keep it from forming. But still, we do have our 10% here. We have the 30% over 5 days, so it has more of a shot over the next 5 days, which would bring it away from those shear winds. The reason we have the 10% is because they're expecting those shear winds to last for the next 2 days. So if it's going to get taken apart before it forms, more than likely that's going to happen in the next 48 hours. If not, then our chances rise to 30%. So that's why you see this checkerboard area here. You'll usually see an X and then the arrow and then where they actually assume it's going to start to form. And that's all based on things we talk about all the time here, guys. That's the jet stream. That's the different pressures in the Atlantic, the Bermuda Atlantic, and also the fact that we have that the remnants of that cyclone system in the Gulf that's actually helping keep this thing on this side of the Bahamas, to the east of the Bahamas. So we do have to keep an eye on it. I'm going to come back to that in a second, but we're going to talk really quick about the UK and Ireland. Alright, here are the current spaghetti plots. We have our black triangle line here. That is the current direction. Now, if you guys have been paying attention over the last couple of days, this has shifted a few times. It was supposedly going to make landfall around here, which would have had a better chance of it still being a hurricane. Now, the farther it moves up north, I want you guys to understand the almost better situation we're in. Now, some of the models show some pretty dramatic colors and winds going on, but we're going to look at those no matter what. But my point is that the more north this comes, it's going to be in cooler water. It's already weakening a tad. It's at 100 miles an hour sustained winds rather than the 105 we were seeing earlier today. But the pressure, this is the weird situation, the pressure is expected to drop as it moves north, but the winds aren't supposed to pick up. Now, that's a rare situation. Sometimes you get that when you're dealing with a hurricane being pulled into cooler waters. It depends on the speed of it, to be honest with you. Now, it's going to be getting pulled pretty quickly, so you're going to see in some of the models it like almost skips a lot of area really quick, and that's due to the speed. That's because of the jet stream speed pulling it really quickly, and you're going to see big swirls that almost cover all of Ireland, all of Northern Ireland, sorry, parts of Scotland, and then the west side, as of right now, of the United Kingdom, and Wales even, Wales down here. The west parts of it for the most part. Now, again, the models are going to show something a little different. That's why we got to wait still another day or two to really get a good idea of where it's going to go. It's expected to be about right here on Monday. So depending on the speeds and depending on the jet stream, we're going to have a better idea in the next probably 30 to 36 hours, I want to say. Just to show you what I mean here, here's a little bit of a timeline which does adjust. It almost changes every 8 hours because we're dealing with this thing moving so quickly. as it moves north that it's very hard to judge the speed and exactly where it's going to go. Now, it does say H here, which means they may expect this thing to make landfall if it stays this way as a hurricane. Now, again, the jet stream is going to play a part in this, and you're going to see on the models it's going to widen out really quickly. And what that is that's the wind base getting wider as it enters cooler water, and also as it's being pulled by the jet stream. It's going to lose its hurricane form, but what that does is that it spreads the winds out over a much wider area. But the only good part about that is that they won't be as strong as hurricane force. I'm thinking, don't quote me on this is just based on data right now. I'm thinking the worst it would be is hurricane force gusts rather than sustained winds, which is a good thing. The gusts will come and go, but sustained winds of anything from 80 to 100, that's when you get damaging stuff, and that's when, just like the U.S. coast that we've been watching all season long, same exact thing for the coast of Western Ireland, the west coast of Northern Ireland, and even when it gets farther than that, we're dealing with the west coast of Scotland. And like I said, this line here may change. It's different in some of the models, so it looks, according to this chart, that almost United Kingdom, and then to the south west, I believe, is Wales, are almost out of the picture here, but that's not necessarily true. This wind field is going to expand, and it almost looks to cover this entire area here. So we're going to be dealing with a big wind event, a lot of rain. It's going to be very damp and cool because just the temperatures right now. So it's not so much a tropical deal as far as temperatures go. We're going to be dealing with just soggy conditions and a lot of rain, regardless of where this thing goes. It's heading in this direction. There's no doubt about that. It just depends on how much the jet stream and the cooler water is going to affect it before it gets here. And we'll take a look at some of the models. We'll start with the European model. I'm just going to run through them by dragging here. I'm not going to hit play. But you can see Ophelia down here. And also, before we even move forward, you can see basically any system that gets pulled up this north. You'll even notice this with systems that come off the East Coast. They may be smaller systems. For example, let's say we have a storm system over western PA going over New York. It'll seem like a small deal around here, but once it gets into the jet stream, you see it just widen out and they become these big giant swirls. So they do look intimidating, but many times they're not as bad as they seem. As you can see here, you want to look for deep purple colors. That's usually the worst of the worst, but a lot of winds up here. I mean, the UK, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland also are always used to strong winds. It's just the way it goes with the jet stream and their placement on the globe. So that's just what we're dealing with. But I'll move forward here. You can see even before the Ophelia is moving up this way, they're going to be dealing with a lot of weather as it is. It's just the way it goes this time of year. So we're moving forward, and you can see right here, according to the European model, that once it gets to this area, it begins to widen out and break up already. Now, this will take away the hurricane characteristics of it, but because of the speed that it's moving, and then it's going to meet with that west to east movement of the jet stream, it's just going to be a lot of swirly, like, crazy winds. I don't think, like I said, I don't think anything like hurricane force sustained winds. I think more of those gusts these areas are going to be dealing with, but still, it's not something to take lightly. It's going to be a decent storm, and you can see with the Europeans here, it almost reforms a bit, and it's putting all these areas at risk. So it doesn't always match up to these timelines we see. You can see this line here, the cone of uncertainty, they've been calling it this year. It actually ends right through the middle of the Irish Sea, and you don't see anything near United Kingdom or Wales. But when you go back to the models, it shows something totally different. Almost those deep purples seem to be going right at those areas near Wales and the United Kingdom. So again, this stuff changes every couple hours, and that's why it's very important to keep an eye on this for all these people that are up here that follow my channel. You got to be aware of this situation. Now, once again, I never tell anyone to go out and start buying food and water and gas. I mean, we've seen what's happened with this season in hurricanes, and it's been a long time since a hurricane made landfall up here. I believe it was 1961, so it's not a common thing. Again, it's not so much expected to be a hurricane when it hits, but it is going to be strong enough to really be different than the normal weather you're used to feeling. So that's the deal with the European. We're going to go to the GFS, see what they have to say. And again, it seems to be breaking up before it gets up to this area. Now let's see if it connects when we move forward. It does. All right, so it begins to almost come back together And those purple colors are going to be the worst of the deal. Now again, don't bank on those just yet. We still have time to check this thing out, but you want to be prepared for the worst. That's always the best thing you can do. So that's the GFS. We'll check out the Canadian version, which is always a little bit exaggerated, but again, the models seem to be pretty consistent on what it's going to be like when it gets to this area. And then pulling through, it says by the 17th it will come and go. So yeah, it's gonna it's gonna be a system, that's for sure. Definitely something to pay attention to. And really quick, the nav gem, we'll check that out. Back up a little bit. Nav gem has it widening out as it's making its northern approach, northeast I should say. And then there we go. We got those deep purples all over, all through the Irish Sea. This time to the east side of Ireland, and then obviously going right into the UK. So that's basically where we're at right now. As far as these areas go, Ireland, Northern Ireland, even as far north as Scotland, and then of course the United Kingdom, even though you're out of that cone right now, you saw the models. I would be prepared for this thing to be a pretty significant storm. Again, it's not positive yet that it's going to be a hurricane at landfall. We did see that H right around here, around that Monday time frame. So it's very important to keep your eyes on this. I'm going to update on it every day throughout the weekend. I'm going to stay as busy as I can for this. I do have the weekend off, so we will keep an eye on this, guys. And that's where we're at for the UK and Ireland for right now. So, guys, prepare for it. That's all I can say for now. And now we'll talk a little bit about our disturbance going on to the east of the Lesser Antilles and the Leeward Islands right now. Now, if you notice on this, guys, you can tell that some of the system is still being pulled to the east. Now, the reason for this is the shear winds we were talking about earlier in the video. That's why that 10% number is put on the next 48 hours. For the next 2 days, there's going to be a lot of shear winds pushing this thing, or at least skimming the top high clouds where you see those deep reds. Those are exploding up into the air, and you can see them peeling off to the east. And that's actually a good thing because the shear winds is what's keeping this thing at that 10% number. Now, once those shear winds let off, which they're expecting in the next 48 hours, that's why we have that jump up to 30%. So if this survives the shear wind event, then that 30% number is going to be significant. It might go a little bit higher than that. Now, that's all we can hope for, at least for the time being. Now, I'm going to show you something on the jet stream real quick that's actually going to aid us in this process, hopefully. So I'm going to back up to 0 hour. Each click here is basically 6 hours. Now, basically this thing's forming right where my mouse is here, and you're going to see as time goes by, the jet stream moves across and it gets really low down here. So what we're thinking is that whether this thing forms or not, it's going to be influenced by the jet stream, and more than likely it's going to keep it from any sort of landfalls in the Bahamas and the East Coast, which is a good thing. Of course, this stuff can change. We all know that, but as of right now, it's looking pretty decent, like I said, whether this thing forms or not. So right now we're about 60 hours into the future. You can see this high loop here, and then we have this dip coming down across the southern states, and that's where if this thing does form, it's going to move up into this area where we saw that checkerboard chart, the yellow 10% thing. But again, once it forms, we have this to actually push it out. So this is all good news, at least for the time being. You can see how low this comes. It comes all the way through Central Florida into the Gulf. And this is 90 hours in the future. 96, this is 102. And you can see right here, there's almost a wall here where it won't be able to penetrate. Now, if we have any sort of breaks in the jet stream in the next 4 or 5 days, that's when we may have to worry about this if it does form. So a lot of different factors at play that have to go right for this thing to form. But as of right now, this stuff is on our side as far as the U.S. goes. I'll just finish moving forward here. 120. This is 126. And you can see this big wall down here is just peeled down and hopefully keeping that system out of our way. And those are our main concerns for right now. So we can see right here the system is still producing a lot of storms, but you can see there's almost like a cutoff line here, and now that's those shear winds I'm talking about that are coming west to east, and it's peeling all this stuff off to the east. So as long as that's going on, it's going to be a really low chance for this thing to form into a counterclockwise motion and then move up into this area. But once that 48-hour period is over, that's when they think the shear winds will be gone, and it may form, but then we have, once again, that low dip in the jet stream that will more than likely push this thing out before it's any sort of threat. Now, in the near future, we can clearly see down here we are getting a lot of action, a lot of storms, and they're being pulled up to the north very quickly into the Caribbean, where we have a lot of warm water here. Remember that system that was next to Florida that moved into the Gulf? It pulled up a lot of warm water through this gap, and it started bleeding into these areas. So we are getting a higher average temperature, at least for now, in the Gulf, and that just raises the chances of anything forming that may come up from this area. So it looks like most of the systems that we're going to deal with in the coming week, maybe 2 weeks, is going to be northern movement from almost the west northwest coast of South America being pulled up into the Caribbean. So this is definitely an area to watch over the next week or so. We obviously have to watch this to see if it forms. And then main concern right now is Ophelia moving up towards Ireland and the UK. So that's about it for now, guys. I'm going to bring another update in the morning. Any significant changes, I will try to bring you tonight. And that's it. Thank you guys so much. I'll talk to you when Friday the 13th is over. Take care.